This is a Flying Cow production.
There was a man named Worrell, Ernest B. Worrell. Let's celebrate this champion.
Well, hello, and welcome back to Around the Worrell, our Patreon exclusive podcast talking all things Ernest P. Worrell. I, of course, am your host, the Flying Cow himself, Clay Johnson, and here with me is my co-host for this podcast, the litigator, Loren Collins. Loren, how are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty well, Clay. Doing pretty well. Glad to finally be into the real earnest, theatrical, the theme of this podcast.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like you said, we are getting into kind of the meat of the films. We dealt with the first film last week, which was Dr. Otto and the Riddle of the Gloom Beam. I had never seen it. Honestly, I hadn't even heard of it until a couple of years ago. But now we are into the earnest stuff that I remember from my childhood. This definitely was the first film that I remember. In fact, I probably saw it not long after it came out. We are, of course, talking today about Ernest Goes to Camp from 1987. Directed by John Cherry, starring, of course, Jim Varney. And the composer on this one was Shane Keister. And also, in addition to Jim Varney, we have, appearances from John Vernon, Victoria Racimo, Gallard Sartain made his first of many appearances.
Yep.
And many more who weren't necessarily known at the time, but became, bigger names. You got
worth noting here. I think it said that this was the last film appearance of Iron Eyes Cody.
Yes, which I'm going to talk about. We're going to talk about Iron Eyes.
We'll have more
Cody.
to say about him later. Exactly.
Yeah, it was. I mean, he didn't actually die until I think sometime in the 90s. Let's see. Yeah, 99.
Oh, wow.
It was his last film that he did. But yeah, and I mean, we're just jumping right into the film. But this film, if you haven't ever seen it, I'm not sure why you're, listening to this podcast. But in case you haven't seen it, basically the plot centers around Ernest is, I guess, a handyman at a camp.
Kind of a handyman / janitor.
Yes,
there at the beginning of the film.
A job that he often fills in most roles, and like a lot of the films that he's in, he has very humble aspirations. In this one, his goal is to become a camp counselor. This film very much takes place in its own version of reality. But basically he wants to become a camp counselor. The camp in question, Camp Kikiki, is on the site. I mean, it is owned by some Native American descendants of Native Americans, Chief St. Cloud, Nurse St. Cloud. It's never said whether or not this is actually part of a Native American reservation, in which case the other subplot is extremely illegal.
It's kind of implied. Anyway. It's kind of implied, I think, when John Vernon comes to visit him, that it maybe used to belong to his tribe, but he may be the only surviving member of it.
Right. I mean,
that's a charitable interpretation of it. But
yeah, his lawyer makes reference to a protection or something like that, which I'm like, why are you guys even mentioning this, or even trying to do this? But yeah, so anyway, he wants to be a counselor. He actually gets to be a counselor, taking care of second chance kids, basically from an institute for, you know, troubled youth, I guess would be the phrase that they use. And then it kind of devolves into a plot about a mining company trying to take over the camp, and you know, Ernest and various other people, you know, getting involved to keep that from happening, to protect
efforts
camp.
to save the camp for the campers, like, you know, however many other 80s films where you needed to save the rec center or save the
right. And that's the thing. You said it right there. This film, like I mentioned, came out in 87. This film is so 80s.
Yes.
The version of this film that exists could have only come out in the 80s, because it is kind of that, you know, we're the plucky upstarts that are going to save this thing, that it makes no sense that we could actually do this, but it's a movie in the 80s, so yeah, rah rah. But it's also like the first part of it is like a slobs versus snobs story, but told with children.
Yeah. Animal House Jr. or something like that.
Yes, very much. But then, and you know, that is very lopsided, because these kids are, you know, from the moment they're even told that they're going to have to pick them up, basically even the counselors are against these children to a ridiculous degree, calling them delinquents, all of this stuff. And like the worst things that they do, I'm like, your other campers are doing the same things to them. They're not being, punished, but because you've decided these kids are bad kids, and I'm just like, I don't get the logic of this at all.
On the one hand, that's a running thing through the film. Like when the first encounter they get into, kerfuffle there in like the dining hall. Like, other kids sort of start the fight. They are the ones who throw the first punch. All of like the delinquent kids end up with punishment. Even the ones who weren't the ones who started the fight, weirdly enough. The Moose is, I think, part of the one being punished.
Yeah, because it's really just, I think, Bobby Wayne and Crutchfield obviously hits Ernest.
Yeah.
But yeah, we see later they're digging a ditch.
Yeah.
And the other kids that started the fight are just walking around messing with them.
Or even worse, later on when the other kids burned their TP down.
Commit arson.
And
they're not punished. And the other kids are threatened with being sent back to their institution.
Because you went back and like fought them after they burned your TP down. It's like, no, clearly the fight was the mistake here.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But like I said, that part of the film suddenly disappears once the whole mining storyline really kicks off with the guy tricking Ernest into getting the chief to sign the lease. And then all of a sudden, when they all decide to fight back, and the two kids that were the jerks the whole time, jump in, suddenly they're all friends.
Yeah, they're all
just
good.
like,
Okay.
It's a little whiplash.
Yeah, I mean, for the first half of this film, give or take, you could almost be mistaken for thinking that the kids are the central characters of this film, and Ernest is just kind of a supporting character in his own movie.
Sure, a little bit in. I mean,
like a prominent supporting character, obviously.
Right. I mean, the thing is, they are getting in because this is the first feature film that they tried to tell with Ernest.
Yeah,
and you can tell that they are trying to do their best to work in the things that they already know work with Ernest. Basically, the commercial type vignettes that they give Ernest in order to show off physical comedy and just do his thing. and they intersperse that with the action of the campers and also interaction with the campers and him. But yeah, there are definitely parts that are void him. The story part of it is being led by these second chance kids. But obviously we're jumping ahead a little bit. We'll go back.
But yeah, the first part of the film almost has like a, for lack of a better comparison here, almost like a Caddyshack type structure, where
it's very loose.
Where
very loose.
Ernest is filling the role kind of Bill Murray. He is the prominent comedic character,
right. more a part of the film than Bill Murray.
He interacts with them a little bit more. But
exactly.
He's there for the comic relief. But like for the first part of it, like the plot's not hinging on Ernest. The plot's all about these kids.
Right.
And only in the latter part does like Ernest really become the central character of this movie.
Right. And like I said, it all of a sudden changes once the mining thing comes in. And I get kind of the other story going on. I would have liked, again, I'm just gonna say this up front. I like this movie. I grew up with this movie. I love this movie. And I will say, I don't think it's a bad film, but there are problems with it. And so we're going to talk about it. And, these things have never bothered me before. But when I watch it for this podcast, I'm like, that is odd that the whole antagonism between the second chancers and the other campers is suddenly dropped. I would have liked a little bit more of a resolution to that storyline than just, oh, you guys are fighting? Let's fight too. Let's all be friends now. I would have liked, number one, I would have liked to see, the other campers get punished. Because if you commit arson against another camper, that should also be grounds for expulsion from the camp. And,
at least some kind of throwaway dialogue where those kids denied it and there's no proof they did it. Like, when they leave behind proof they did it, it's hard to, for them to claim innocence. But at least give the counselors an out to say like they're playing favorites or something. It's like, we know who started the fight. You guys started the fight. We don't know who started the fire. So we're not going to punish anyone for that. But the film doesn't do that. The film
No. I mean, there is a little bit of that frustrating, they're obviously against these second chancers with no real reason as to why. And then again, that is, unexplainably resolved through the fact that they all fight together through the mining scene, which the mining storyline, I clocked it, doesn't come up for the first 26 minutes of this film.
That's fine.
It just kind of shows you that it was, I think it was just realized that they couldn't really do a whole film just based on the camp, and they couldn't do a whole film just with the mining company being the antagonist. So they needed to do a mix. I will say, I think it was a good idea to do a mix. I won't say that it was 100% successful, but I think for a first film, they did as good as you might expect. And honestly, you look at a lot of the 80s classics from around the same time, a lot of them have a very similar loose structure. So
it allows you to have conflict inside the camp for the first part of the film, and then expanded where now the camp is fighting an outside force.
Right. It would have just been nice for them to have resolved the internalized conflict before the externalized conflict became the lead villain. It would have been, the only thing that I would have worried about that is that it would have been too easy. Like, you guys are all right. Yeah, you guys are all right too. Little too 80s. And there's some tropes like that.
I don't think you need to have them resolved in order, but I do think you need to tie them together a little more than having the two bullies show up and just like ask for forgiveness and everybody
says, "Need some help?"
Yeah.
Sure, come on. Yeah, it's like
there needs to be some beat where they actually change their ways and like help one of the kids they've been bullying, or where
right.
these kids actually go out of their way to help these bullies who've been treating them terribly all this time, and then they
Yeah.
realize we've been in the wrong, we forgive you now.
Yeah, something
Something.
to kind of tie up that storyline before we move on.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, we're just talking about this up front to just kind of give you an idea of kind of the messiness of the film overall. Because, like I said, it's apparent in the very first scene that this film is taking place in its very own version of reality. Because in the first scene, we see basically Ernest, I guess he's just tightening the ropes on the sign, or
I want to point out this is not the first scene.
Is it not?
The first scene is a flashback. The first scene is it? Remember, it's a flashback to ancient times.
That's right. Oh, I forgot. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, you're right. The first scene is a flashback.
Yep.
Basically, and I think the reason I skipped this is because I wanted context, because this opens a whole new can of worms.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. Should we go ahead and tackle that now?
No, we can come back to this later. We go ahead with your point about the Ernest scene.
Okay, let's go ahead and mention this, because yes, the first Ernest scene in the film, I will say, is he's up on a ladder and he's just kind of running the screwdriver into the ropes on the sign, and I'm like, I guess he's just tightening it up. I don't really know.
Yeah, just for aesthetic reasons. Just to have
Yeah. I mean, they all look pretty tight to me, but I guess you do it enough. It's his job anyway. Obviously, he's prepping for the camp.
He has
prepping the camp. Yeah. Well, he's prepping the camp before the campers arrive.
Exactly.
But he basically in this scene makes it clear that his and this is it's kind of that bringing in that commercial aesthetic of Ernest breaking the fourth wall, talking to the camera, but not talking to Vern. In fact, Vern is name checked in a campfire story.
Yep.
But Vern, in his typical fashion, does not actually show up in this film.
No.
But
and you're right. The opening scene, he breaks the fourth wall. He talks straight to camera, just like in the old ads. Not just like in the ads. In the ads, he talks to Vern. In this, he's just breaking the fourth wall and talking to the camera.
And I will say, now, granted, I grew up with this film, but this doesn't seem odd to me at all. No, I think partially because of the way that Ernest has been set up, we're used to him talking to us, even though he's often calling the camera Vern. Even if he's not saying Vern, this doesn't feel weird from him.
No,
this doesn't feel like a weird way for them to start the film.
He's that kind of character. It's a Deadpool thing after all. It's just
exactly. Talking to the audience, breaking the fourth wall. But he is basically bringing up the fact that his goal is to become a camp counselor, a job that is typically given to teenagers.
Yes.
And
humble aspirations.
Yes, it makes it seem. And I mean, we can mention it, but later on in the film, it basically looks like suddenly this camp is year round, and Ernest, being a counselor, is a substantial enough job that he can live off of this.
I mean, if they give him room and board, I suppose there's not much else the man needs.
But I mean, they also apparently by the end of the film decide that the second chance kids can stay there all year, which I'm like, are they going to school from here? What is the deal here? Because he's like,
Ernest is their teacher.
Yeah, I'm like, my kids don't have to go back to the institute, and this camp's got a year-round counselor. And I'm just like, okay, that is the part of the rules of this world.
Yeah.
I mean, but then we also have a construction guy that I will say, if we're working in those rules, the fact that they're able to actually get a legal injunction is almost like reality intruding on this version of reality.
Well, I'm more than happy to discuss the legal, aspects of this film
and
later
we'll get
on.
to that.
Yeah.
But it also takes place in a world where a villain's recourse for not getting his way is to shoot a man.
Yes, multiple times.
Or well, attempt.
Well, I mean, yes, attempt to
Yes.
shoot him multiple times.
Yes.
Like with witnesses around.
Yes.
And then the police show up seconds later. I have to assume, to jump all the way to the ending of this film, that Mr. Crater probably got arrested and charged with attempted murder.
I mean, I think he runs off like a child after the whole gun incident.
I mean, assuming he gets away, but again, multiple witnesses, including like his own lawyer, who seems like an ethical guy. I'll talk about him later. It's like,
I mean, as much as he can be, yeah. I mean, so obviously we are dealing with a world of heightened realism. There are, it's not like this takes place in outer space or anything like that. Although Ernest Goes to Space, don't know how that never happened. Yeah. But
I'm going to guess budget reasons. It was really hard to make Tennessee look like space.
True. But I mean, I'm sure they had the thoughts though.
Yeah.
But obviously, all Ernest films there's gonna be a heightened sense of reality. There's gonna be the things that you recognize, but there also are gonna be things that's like, well, that couldn't happen in real life. No, it's an Ernest film. Yeah. Of course not. And obviously, I'm willing to forgive all of those. But it doesn't mean we can't point them out.
Yeah.
But to your earlier point, that is not the first scene. You mentioned before we started, and I also mentioned the fact that I could not find this on streaming.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it's one of the only Ernest films that I could not find on streaming.
Yeah.
And I feel, I will say, you can find Ernest Goes to Africa on streaming. And if the Native American depictions are the reason, Ernest Goes to Africa should be nowhere near streaming, because at least this is a good movie.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen Ernest Goes to Africa. I've just never heard good things. I'm just saying. But this film obviously at the very core is dealing with a lot of Native American, history and, depictions and all sorts of things. Now, I don't think that they had a like a Native American like
a backlash.
Like a researcher or an advisor, yes. Or
I'm going to guess no, unless Iron Eyes Cody was that advisor.
In which case, not a good call.
Does not count. Yeah,
we'll talk about Iron Eyes Cody in a second.
Oh,
yeah. But obviously, they meant no offense in the film. And I will say,
as 80s films go, where their heart is, they're trying to be respectful.
Yes. And I will say, with the exception of a couple of actors in the first scene, because the first scene is basically a depiction of their idea of a Native American ceremony, basically of a boy becoming a warrior and in a sense, I'm guess becoming a man
Yeah.
type of idea.
A Native American bar mitzvah.
Right. And this ceremony is later described as the ceremony of the blade, the stone, and the arrow. And basically it shows basically a young man standing or being, I guess, tied to the same symbol of the camp, and then having various things, objects, sharp objects thrown at him, I guess, to show his bravery, is the idea. I do not believe that this is actually a Native American ceremony.
I cannot imagine that it is. No.
there might be, things that are analogous, but I'm pretty sure that if they had any sort of stories that were anywhere close, they just kind of lumped things together and were like, this sounds like a good idea. But I do not think, as you said, I do not think that they had an advisor or anything like that. In fact, as far as I can tell, they had very little actual Native American representation on the set. I mean, like I said, in the scene, both the guy throwing the various things and the young man himself are both very shrouded in shadow. So you can't see a lot of them, and it's also at night and firelight. Really hoping there wasn't a lot of makeup done. There is one person whose face we can see. Basically, he's just looking on approvingly. And I would doubt he's Native American. He looks much like just a white man in the native garb.
Yeah, at least one of them does just looks like a white guy.
Yes. Yeah. But I do think that they tried their best for the time, I believe, to be respectful. It's just with modern eyes and with actual, eyes of actual Native Americans, it might not appear the same.
I will say here, looking down the IMDb cast list, it lists what I think are 3 cast members for that. Identifies them.
Okay.
The medicine man, judging by his name of, I'm going to assume it's probably Native American because his name is Jeff Standing Bear.
Okay, well, I mean, we also have Iron Eyes Cody.
Yeah, Iron Eyes Cody, but again, the Iron Eyes Cody doesn't have the same ring to it as Jeff Standing Bear. That unless he changed it, that would probably be a Native American last name. Oh wait, actually, it says he is It doesn't give a tribe, but his profile strongly suggests that he's Native American.
Okay.
The other 2 names, however, less so. It lists the Indian Brave is played by Paulo de Leon.
I was going to say a lot of times they would cast, actors of Latinx descent.
Yeah. And there's no information on him. The fellow who played his father in that scene, also there's no information on him. He's from North Carolina. His name is Harvey Godwin Jr., which
probably
can't rule it out, but it's not
sure.
It's no Jeff Standing Bear.
No.
So.
Well, and again, we will get to Iron Eyes Cody in a second, but we're gonna save him for last.
Yeah.
The other actor in the film that portrayed a Native American was Victoria Racimo, who played Nurse St. Cloud.
Yeah, she doesn't. She never gets the first name, does she?
No,
she's credited as Nurse St. Cloud.
Right. So. Yes. Yeah. I will say nothing that I can find. She does not have a Wikipedia. Nothing on her IMDb says that she is Native American, but she does at least look more Native American than
she very well could be.
I mean, she actually was like an award-winning filmmaker, writer, producer, actress. Did, you know, actually a bunch of different stuff. She unfortunately passed in 2020, not long ago. But yeah, like I said, I don't see anything that explicitly says that she was Native American.
No.
But, you know, obviously there's much more to her life than her, you know, heritage. So, you know, perhaps that just was not deemed important.
By the way, to jump back real quick to the testing of that young brave and your suggestion of whether or not it was real or not. Like part of the reason my my skeptical radar goes off as to whether or not that was a real trial someone would be put through is like it feels wrong to me. And not that I'm an expert in this, but it feels wrong that the trial would be to restrain someone to that and then throw things at them. It's like if you're trying to test someone's bravery and courage, what you would want to do is like see if they flinch or like move away from the thing you were throwing at them. Is like their test of their personal,
right. It's a test of bravery.
It's a test of bravery. Yeah. Your job is to stand there, you know, either facing them or with your back to them and have the faith that like, nope, this is going to be okay. I'm going to see this through and like let it happen. If you're restrained, like all you do is just sort of wait through it. Like you don't control anything at all.
Sure.
And honestly, that's what happens to Ernest at the end. Like Ernest has the decision to run or do something, but he, in his own way, stands his ground in that scene. Yeah. It would mean something very different if Ernest is like restrained and not running from the gun.
Right. I mean, yeah, he's in that scene when he kind of has his own test. I mean, he's not running away. But at the same time, this is a guy with a gun. So it's not like, you know, there's much he can do. But he's kind of, you know, moving up and down. And, you know, when they actually fire, he's still ish. But and
after the first one, he's leaning into like, bring it.
Oh, well, no, after the second one. After the third one, he's cocky. Yeah. Okay. But I will say on further digging, apparently Victoria Racimo was Filipino and Irish heritage, but she did play Native Americans in other films as well. But so, you know, digging further into this, let's talk about Iron Eyes Cody. Because Iron Eyes Cody basically made his name playing Native Americans in films
going back to the 40s, I think.
The 20s.
Actually. Oh, I was far back at the 20s. Wow,
his earliest roles were in the early were in the, I believe, 27. Jeez. All the way until this film in 87. So 60 years.
Yeah.
And he was not Native American.
No.
But he maintained through the majority of his life that he was. Yes. He was actually, I believe, of Sicilian descent.
He was the son of two first-generation immigrants from Italy. He was born possibly Espera de Corti.
Yeah. And in fact, it was not made public knowledge until in the late 90s. Well, actually, I guess mid-90s, 96. His half-sister was like, he's Italian. I don't know what you guys are talking about. And he basically denied it. Just straight up denied it. Now, I don't know if he denied it because this was his livelihood. I mean, this was after he'd stopped making movies. Oh, yeah. But I don't know if this was, denial out of, just kind of trying to protect himself, or if he had been doing it so long that he had convinced himself, or maybe he believed that there was some. I mean, I will say, I had always been told when I was a child that we had Native American ancestry in our family. In fact, when my father was 5 years old, he went off into the woods to find his Native American relatives.
Yep.
Believed it so strong. We've had several people in our family do ancestry things. Some of them are still in denial. But from what we can tell, the ancestor that everyone swears, oh, no, they were Native American. They just had to lie about it. They were Swedish.
Yeah.
The blood, I mean, you can, I mean, maybe documentation was faked. You can't fake blood.
I will say, if those reports are accurate, if both of his parents were born in Italy and came to the U.S., it's going to be really hard to figure out where the Native American ancestry would
have come from. Yeah, but
from Italy.
Like I said, I don't know. Like I said, if maybe the man just had done it for so long that he convinced himself. Because, I mean, this was. I don't think that he did anything else in film. I think he was always native. Claimed his father was Cherokee and his mother was Cree.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's awfully specific.
Yeah. So, what really
it feels to me
gross,
like he just decided to keep running with the story. It's like it's late in his life.
I feel like that is a possibility. I also have known people that have told the same lie so long that they start to believe it.
Sure.
So you have to wonder if there was some of that going in. I do wonder though, because throughout this film, there are several scenes in which he speaks a version of a Native American language.
And I would love to know what that language that is.
I was about to say.
I haven't found anything that says.
I am wondering if he was just so good at his research that he actually learned some words in a particular dialect.
Yeah.
Or if he's just speaking gibberish and basically everyone says, that's not this, he's just like, no, it's this.
Yeah.
In which case, that makes me really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Especially because even before rewatching this film, I remember like the chant that he did, like during the the scene where he's like preparing all of the kids for battle and all that stuff. That is ingrained in my head.
Yeah.
And to worry, is this actual, depiction of a culture, or is this just a man spewing gibberish and claiming that it is native speak?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I looked down I'm glancing at it again. I looked down the list of IMDb trivia yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It did not address this as an issue.
No, and I mean there's no list on, because a lot of times if there are issues of this kind in a film, there will be like a list of some sort of controversy or something like that.
Yeah.
And I do not see any mention of that anywhere. I mean, part of it is, this film, there's a reason that there were more Ernest films after this. This was actually quite a success. It only had a budget of, I believe, $3.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
But the box office was 23.5. So it made $20 million. Yes. In 1987, that's a good return. For as small of a budget as it is, to do 20 million in profit. I mean, not counting obviously any promotional work that they would have done. But that's, you can see how they got distribution. You can see how they got, because this is the first film that is distributed by Touchstone and Buena Vista. Yeah, Disney basically.
And I'll say too,
was
when you were
involved
talking earlier about how this one's not available on streaming, even though Africa is, and
Yeah.
I wonder if that might be part of the issue. If Disney technically owns the streaming rights to this, whereas Africa is just owned by whoever did.
Well,
all
I
the-
mean, they have Ernest Saves Christmas. I mean,
that's what I mean. They have Ernest Saves Christmas.
All
That's-
four of the big ones
Yeah.
are on streaming in various places. Not all of them on. Well, with the okay, so 3 out of the 4 big ones are on streaming. Not all of them on Disney Plus. Ernest Saves Christmas is on Disney Plus at least during Christmas time.
Yeah.
But the other 2 I think are available in other places like Tubi and things, not owned by. Actually, I take that back. One of them might be on Hulu.
Yeah.
But
no, what I'm saying is, when you were asking like why would Africa be streaming and Camp not, despite the level of offensiveness, it's like whoever has the whatever rights to Africa, it's like it's free money for them. They'll put it online, they'll make the advertising revenue.
Sure.
Disney has different standards for this kind of stuff. So it may not pass Disney's standard of what they want to put on Disney Plus. I honestly don't think it would rise to that level, but like I'm just suggesting that this would be a Disney question.
I was about to say, I feel like this is a little less offensive than some of the things in Dumbo.
Fair enough. Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
As an example.
Yeah. It's just that the same people making the decision to stream Africa are not the ones making the decision to stream Camp. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, like I said, there was maybe a little misguided, but I do think that they intended to be as respectful as they were able to. Because I mean, you know, we mentioned that there wasn't a Native American advisor. I don't think things like that were really common practice in the 80s.
No, I don't think so.
They definitely wouldn't have done it, you know, out of fear of offending anyone. You know, you know, the only thing would have been, you know, just accuracy of, you know, things like that. And I don't think that they were most film productions weren't going to be concerned with accuracy when it came to, unfortunately, depicting Native cultures.
Yeah,
perhaps they should have been
a little bit more. Yeah. The IMDb trivia page,
not perhaps they should have been.
Yeah, exactly. The trivia page makes a passing reference that Iron Eyes Cody spoke an indigenous tribal language, but doesn't say what. And that's also a user submitted thing, so there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
I found one Reddit page with someone asking, what language was this? But no answer to what might have been.
That is, yeah. I mean, like I said, you know, the man made it part of his life. So I would, if somebody told me, oh, he learned Cherokee.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would track if that's the story he told all those years. Yeah, he learned some Cherokee at some point.
Yeah, if you know there are any Cherokee speakers that could actually back that up, I would love, or you know, or course, any native speakers that know what language this is that can back that up.
Yep.
I would.
There's also sign language in the film, which for all I know might be ASL, but
it is Plains Indian Sign Language.
Oh, it is. Okay.
So yeah, I was also a little concerned about that because I was like, is this something that they're making up? But no, it is actually, because again, Ernest is going above and beyond to be a counselor specifically for this camp, because he is the only other person at the camp besides his granddaughter, the chief's granddaughter, who can also converse with the chief, which of course becomes a plot point later on. But yeah, I mean, you know, I think that we're covered talking about the Native American stuff. I mean, like I said, it does come up. Obviously, you know, it's the focus of the camp, so it's going to come up a lot. I would hope that it is not overly offensive to people from that culture, but I am not. So, you know, if it is, you know, if you are someone that can't watch this film because of, you know, the way that the culture is depicted, I would love to hear from you. But
I'll say too, it makes me happy to know that it was actual plain sign language, because I really
Yeah.
liked the scene when he uses it the first time with Nurse St. Cloud,
Yeah.
simply because like it reads as like Ernest, not being proficient in this, not being a terribly smart man. Like he's learned the language, but he has to stop and think between each word to try to remember what it is he's doing. Like he can't do it, but it's taking actual mental energy to pull this off. And
well, I
I
mean,
like how he
it's
played
also I don't think it's something that he does all the time.
No.
It's literally just around. I mean, mostly around the chief, and I think he really just does it here to show her that he learned it.
Uh-huh.
I feel like this is probably a recent thing that he has taken on.
Yeah.
But
I liked it as a character beat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've kind of mentioned a lot about the camp. Let's talk a little bit more about the second chance campers, because it is mentioned that they are part of a program mentioned by the way in a scene with I guess, excuse me, the guy the head counselor of Camp Kikiki, Mr. Tipton, played by Larry Black, who, if he's done anything else, I don't have any record of it. I think he might have just done like some local stuff or things like that. But I think he's actually pretty decent at this part. I mean, for what it is. I always just assumed as a kid that he was just like a regular actor. He comes off pretty convincing in this role, and does the typical kind of does not really know what's going on in his camp at all. Is kind of oblivious to the fact that all of his campers are assholes, and a lot of his counselors as well. He's just like, well, everybody's doing their best, kind of thing. Yeah. But brings to the attention of the counselors, which there are only 3 counselors in this room. I'm like, please tell me there are more than 3 counselors at this camp.
Yeah.
Because we've seen quite a few children. By the way, this is an all boys camp, which I thought was interesting. I mean, I went to camp a couple of times, and they almost always had at least a girl side of the camp. I never went to a camp that was all boys.
Admittedly, the only summer camp I ever went to was Boy Scout camp. So
Sure, that makes sense. And I suppose this is kind of a type of idea of that, because it, without
I don't know.
reductive,
It does feel just like a normal summer camp. Like they're just wearing the t-shirts to Camp Kikiki. It doesn't feel like they're part of any organization outside of Camp Kikiki.
No, but it does kind of seem like it's like because they say that at the end of camp, some of you guys will be able to do the ceremony of the blade, the stone, and the arrow, which I'm like, what does that look like for Camp Kikiki?
Yeah.
I mean,
Nerf.
I'm like, I'm interested to know how you guys do that, because I don't think any parent would sign off on that.
They have very good waivers, very thorough waivers at Camp Kikiki.
Yeah.
They got good lawyers. They got that injunction there at the end. So
yeah. I'm like, when did you guys get lawyers? But yeah, so I'm sure every institution of this type would have some sort of legal representation. Yeah. But anyway, so he lets them know that the second chance kids are coming, and we are introduced, like I said, immediately to the idea that everyone in this camp is against this idea, with the exception of Mr. Tipton. He's just like, oh, we'll give him a chance, kind of thing. And even when we go to the institution, the woman who is basically introduces these children played, where is her name? Did they not list her here? It's okay. Played by Jackie Welch, who you might remember from the last film,
Dr. Otto.
Dr. Otto, of course. Yeah. And she actually has 2 appearances in this film because she not only makes a physical appearance, but the song that is playing when they go to the second chance place doing time is actually sung by Jackie Welch. Yeah. But she immediately, when Ernest is all like, I'm here to pick up the second chancers, and she's just like, oh, good for you. And basically he's just like, well, my motto is I've never met a bad kid. And she's like, well, let me introduce you to some. I will say, yes, it's very like, wow, really bad attitude going on here, but at the same time it's kind of a fun part, so it's like, okay, all right. But yes, I will say she also mentions that basically they're sending to the camp, this is not a reward for campers doing well, or for people in the institute doing well. They are sending their worst kids to take part in this camp. And I'm like, that sounds like a mistake.
Hopefully it's gonna, rehabilitate him.
Yeah, I'm just like, this sounds to me like it should be a rewards program. You guys are doing well, you get to go to camp.
Yeah.
But no, they send them their worst kids, the kids that the detention center can't get through to a regular camp,
which is staffed by 4 people.
Yeah.
3 of whom are kids.
Yes. Oh, yes. So, yes. But we meet the campers, and our campers, we have Bobby Wayne, played by Patrick Day, Crutchfield, played by Scott Menville, who you might not recognize the name, but you are probably familiar with Scott Menville. He has been the voice of Robin in various things, most notably Teen Titans and Teen Titans Go. He was also on, I remember seeing him in Full House. He was Kimmy Gibbler's boyfriend. And I believe he actually came back in Fuller House as well. And there were a couple of things that you mentioned that he was in.
I mean, I was mainly
mostly voice work.
I mean, he has an extensive voice acting resume, but at this point he's most famous for doing, because he's done Robin in the Teen Titans productions for over a decade now.
Right.
Yeah. I also incidentally discovered yesterday his father, who unfortunately passed away like when he must have been pretty young, in like 92.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. His father had an extensive work history in animation.
Okay, that makes
he worked on, I want to say it said like Tiny Toons and other things in the 80s. And he was working on a Batman at the animated series episode when he passed away.
Okay.
So he'd only he got a story credit on it, but no, he did a lot of work in Hollywood, which I don't know if that's how it got Scott plugged into this film, when so many of the other kids were just like local Boy Scouts and things like that.
Right. I mean, yeah, I mean, there are various kids in this who, went on to have bigger careers. And then there are like, there's a scene later on where, when they're at the lake and they start pushing kids in, there's a kid that looks after Moose as he walks away, and he's like, I'll get you. And it's obviously ADR, and they focus on the kid for a second. We never see that kid again. I'm like, that must have been a producer's kid.
Yeah.
I'm just like, why did we focus on that kid? Why did we give that kid a line? Must have been, in part of the production. But we also have Danny Simpson, played by Danny Capri. Butch Too Cool Vargas, played by Jacob Vargas, who has continued acting and performing. We have Chip Osgood, played by Todd Lloyd, and Moose, Mustafa Hakeem Jones, played by Hakeem Abdullah Samad. And he actually was part of an R&B boy band originally known as The Boys. And also now known, I guess, as the Sons of Light.
Okay.
Or Sons of Light. But yeah.
He was also at one point, for some production, the voice of Franklin for a Peanuts production.
That's right. That's right. He was. So yeah, you know, we've got some. I will say, as a kid, I remember thinking that I had seen most of these second chance kids in like various 80s projects. Like I would have sworn up and down to you that Bobby Wayne I had seen in some other you know, like 80s thing. I probably though got him confused with Jason Bateman because they're not ridiculously similar, but slightly similar. You know,
those are in the days that predated IMDb. You could go check someone's resume. You're just having to like remember what someone looked like.
Exactly. But yeah, I would have told you that I had seen all of these kids in other things. Whereas, as far as I can tell, a lot of them didn't do a whole lot of work outside of this. I will also say that one of the lead bully kids, Brooks, was played by Richard Speight Jr., who has a career in a bunch of things. Most well known for me, he played the Archangel Gabriel in Supernatural.
Oh.
So yeah, he's, you know, had, you know, gone on to a bigger career as well. I will say it took me a second to place him and I was like, oh yeah, I guess that's him. Because he looks a little, I mean, you know, he's a teenager.
Yeah.
But it took me a second to realize that was the same guy. But yeah. So, you know, they come in and immediately they are not given a fair shake. Their original counselor, Stennis, just assumes they're going to be troublemakers and gives them all the, you know, gives them no latitude whatsoever. You know, they immediately get into a fight in the cafeteria because one of the kids trips Moose, which, like we said before, leads Stennis to assign them to dig a ditch, while the other two kids who started the fight just walk past on their way to the lake. No, nothing done. I will say there is a bit at that point where I'm a little confused because Crutchfield specifically says, all I need is one good shot at Blondie. And I'm like, which one's Blondie? Because they're both blonde. Both of these bully-ish kids. And I will say, from moment one, both of these two campers, Brooks and Pennington played by Andy Woodworth, are depicted as they bully Ernest, for crying out loud. I mean, honestly, in this film, just about everyone picks on Ernest. He's kind of there as, you know, the lovable oaf kind of thing, but he's always trying his best. He's always trying to, you know, give people the best. But yeah, you know, that's really kind of the camp storyline. Like I said, different things are introduced. You know, we see different vignettes. This camp is never seen to actually have organized activities. It looks more like the counselors just, you know, decide to do things with their various kids because, you know, Ernest leads the kids on because at a certain point, the kids basically, they push Stennis, who's sitting on a lifeguard podium, into the water, which causes him to hurt his leg.
Yep.
Doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Not a whole lot.
He does. He hurts his leg. And they did this because I guess he threw Moose in the water when
Yeah.
Moose straight up said he couldn't swim.
Which I want to stress is probably the worst thing they do. Like that is legitimately bad. You just like broke a counselor's leg. That's the thing that should get them in trouble, and it really doesn't.
No, because that is the one thing that they actually do. I mean,
well, there's a second thing.
That's
the one that should actually get them sent home.
That is the one thing that they do without being 100% like baited.
Yeah.
One could argue that
again, there is a second one.
Retaliation.
In a minute.
One could say that it was in retaliation for what they did to Moose, which, again, Moose, part of this group. This group is supposed to be the worst of the worst from the detention facility.
Yeah.
Aside from a little bit of cockiness when they first walked into the cafeteria, why the hell is Moose even at that center, much less in this group?
Yeah. That's one thing I thought the film dropped the ball on when they were introduced. It's like Jackie Welch like introduces them by name.
Yes.
Briefly touches on like a characteristic. I remember like Osgood is referred to as like the Albert Einstein of the group. But we get no further detail of what these kids have done.
Yeah, I mean, she describes some of them as like coming from a background of of being thieves, or coming from a background of basically their whole families are criminals. It wouldn't be that difficult
for the film to spend just a little bit of time giving some characteristic stuff about what make these kids preferably uniquely bad.
Sure,
why they
but not they never mention
why are they considered the worst of the worst.
But she never says anything about Moose other than that he's small.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Moose doesn't display
in fact
negative characteristics.
His first line is, "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, ma'am." Yeah. He's polite.
Yeah.
What? Why is? Okay, all right. I really don't.
Maybe we should just assume that Moose, apart from the personal, the absolute politeness, is just a serial arsonist or something like that. It's just
either that, or I'm thinking maybe he's like a con man or something like that.
The thing, he still doesn't play like that. He just his personality is perfectly.
He seems actually very sincere. Yeah. So yeah, it is hard to understand why Moose in particular.
Yeah, Moose does not fit at all. Not
no.
One of the kids could be established as like a pickpocket. One of them could.
One of them is Crutchfield is because Crutchfield somehow has Ernest's wallet before they've met.
Yes, exactly. Which honestly is kind of a funny bit. You're right. You are.
It is.
But again, does that ever come back into play again? Like once you have established that Crutchfield is a pickpocket, you could. That's a thing you can play with.
You're right, and I will say I noticed this. Like you mentioned, they mentioned that Osgood is which. Aside from Moose, the only one's name that I really remember without revisiting this film is Chip Osgood because of the way that she says it. Chip Osgood. Good. I just love the way that she says that. But yes, she describes him as the Albert Einstein of the institution. Aside from one situation where I guess he's shown as being very good at cards, and then the other, I guess he helped draw up the plan for saving the camp at the end.
Yeah, and when those
are the only times that he's shown to be smart or any sort of master. Yeah, you're right. These things don't come back.
No, when they're using the catapult,
in the plot,
like he's calling out numbers for
coordinates
them
and things like that. Yeah,
to direct the catapult, but it's not clear what he is calling out, like coordinates.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to apply to anything really.
They're all just they're all clearly pointing at the same place. So it's like,
yeah. Honestly, it sounds more like a quarterback calling a play.
Yeah, it does.
Than anything. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I will say I do think that she does a good job of establishing why they're there, because she mentioned that Bobby Wayne has been in and out of institutions since he was 11. He corrects her and says 9, and I believe Danny, has his entire family are criminals, Butch is just too cool, which I'm like, okay, he wears sunglasses and he thinks he's cool. I don't get what the issue is there. And again, Moose, I don't know why he is here. But yes, I would have liked those things to come back. But
here's the thought. If the film had done a better job of establishing their specific criminal tendencies early on. Okay, we're going to establish Crutchfield's a pickpocket. We're going to establish Osgood is being the Albert Einstein. He's a con man. Basically he is a grifter who gets the better of people because he is smarter. Sure. We established that one of them is just I don't know, violent. Like he's a good fighter or whatever it is.
Sure.
Whatever the case may be. But give them those traits, revisit them, just sort of reestablish them at some point. That's how they interact with the people that are bullying them one way or the other.
Yeah.
Crutchfield steals one of the bullies, something or other. And then maybe at the end, here's a thought. Instead of, or in addition to the whole catapult bit, they then use all their little criminal traits to get the better of Crater and his company.
That would have been great if maybe Crutchfield had gone and stolen a bunch of stuff from them or something like that.
He managed to lift off their keys or something like that.
Right.
They can't drive
that would have been great.
Crutchfield stole their keys.
Yeah, that would have been actually really good. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it would have been nice for it to come back. One other thing that I do want to mention, though, I don't know how much thought was given to it. These second chance kids, half of them are people of color, and they are the only people of color
this entire whole
camp, and they are the part of the group that is being shit on for no good reason.
Yeah,
it's really, it's like, ooh,
it is a very pale camp. Yeah.
I even looked out to be like, oh, surely there's a Latinx kid, or even maybe even a Native American kid or something, because no, they're all white. They're all very, very white, and they are literally picking on the group with the only people of color in the camp.
Yeah.
It's like, ooh, or I don't know how intentional that was, more than
it raises uncomfortable implications as to why Moose is in the group, quite frankly.
Little bit. And I mean, it does, honestly, because unfortunately, those types of kids would have been more likely to be in an institute of that type, excuse me, in that area. And I'm assuming that this is a southern state. I mean, it was filmed in Tennessee. It's never explicitly stated where the camp is supposed to be taking place, but I would assume that it would be a similar-ish area.
Yeah.
A lot of those places are going to be predominantly white, and a lot of those institutes are going to be having kids from bigger cities, which are going to have more people of color in them.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate that there wasn't representation on both sides, so that it didn't feel like, oh, these white kids are picking on those, on the people of color.
On the plus side, it means our protagonists are more diverse than our villains.
It's true. They're a little more diverse than our antagonists.
Our antagonists are white dudes. Yeah.
But that would have, that so much more means that I wish there had been a better close to that story than just, well, I guess we're all on the same side now because these construction people are trying to take out our camp. Okay. I do want to now mention the construction because we're over an hour in. We probably want to start getting in towards the rest of this stuff. But I guess the head of the Crater Mining Company, Sherman Crater, is played by John Vernon.
Mm-hmm.
Now, typically in independent films, a lot of times you will have the majority of the cast will be unknowns, and you might have one, maybe two, that are kind of your gets, that are kind of, these are the people that are in the film to kind of get eyes on the film.
So someone you can put on the poster on the DVD cover,
Right. And I mean, I will say
that did a bunch of those kind of films.
Right. Jim Varney at this time as Ernest would have been a little bit more known to a national audience, but I think they still wanted to get more notable people in the film. And so John Vernon is one of their gets.
Yep.
John Vernon, who honestly played a lot of villains in these types of films in the 80s. He was the dean in Animal House.
Yeah, Animal House.
And was also the mayor in Dirty Harry. Was in The Outlaw Josie Wales. Was known for kind of playing. It was also, I believe, the sheriff in Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is I believe you mentioned a connection to a later Ernest film.
Yes. Killer Clowns has a connection to Ernest Scared Stupid. So yeah.
Right, which we'll talk more about when we get to that film. But I found that an interesting connection. But yeah, he is a bit of a get, because he was kind of a go-to heavy for these types of films.
Yep.
You saw John Vernon in a film at this time, you knew he was the bad guy.
Yeah.
It was easy language for a film. You don't have to set up that this guy is despicable. He's being played by John Vernon. He's the bad guy. Get it?
Yeah.
It's shorthand.
Yeah. By the way, I looked down his credits list. In addition to like all those live action ones, he was the voice of Doctor Doom at one point on one of the Marvel animated series.
Nice, because he's got a great voice. He really does
have a great voice. Yeah. He was the voice of Doctor Doom in I think it was the Fantastic Four cartoon. He was the voice of General Thaddeus Ross in what I imagine was probably the Hulk cartoon. It was one of the other Marvel cartoons.
Okay.
He was Doctor Strange in like a Spider-Man cartoon. Playing a hero at one point, honestly. And honestly, the one that I heard the most
but kind of a dark, mysterious hero.
He must have been.
Yeah.
And
Doctor Strange, yeah.
Of these, the ones I heard him the most was he was the voice of Rupert Thorne back in Batman the Animated Series.
Okay.
So he a number of
You know what? Now that you mentioned that, absolutely. I remember that. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have, when I heard it, I wouldn't have been like, that's John Vernon. But now that you mention it, I'm like, that is John Vernon.
That's how good Andrea Romano was back in the day. But yeah, he's playing sort of a shady, corrupt businessman. And yeah, he kills it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that he's great in this film. I mean, he is very obviously two-dimensional. He is a corrupt businessman who's trying to get Camp Kikiki. It does not matter the legality of how he gets it. All that matters is that he gets it so that he can mine petricite.
Yes.
Which, I mean, I will say, they do at least mention that petricite is important for the space program and for defense contracts.
Yeah.
So we have established a reason that petricite is important.
Yeah.
Which a lot of bigger movies don't bother to do. I was actually listening today to somebody talk about Avatar and the fact that unobtainium is mentioned as important, but it's never mentioned why it's important.
Yeah.
In that film.
Yep. Petricite also just sounds like it could be real in a way that unobtainium obviously does not.
No. Why weren't they just mining for petricite? We know it's good for space travel, for space programs.
Yeah.
That makes sense. But honestly, I would have loved that nod. That would have been
great.
The
dilithium of the Ernest universe.
Yes. Yes. Petricite. But yeah, like I said, he is arch without being arch. Because what I love about John Vernon's performance is that it's actually grounded. it's not until you really dissect what he's saying and the things that you realize how arch he is. But he's never big and theatrical and over the top. It's always it's just measured, and it's cold, and it's ruthless, and it's great. I think it's a great performance, and he is 100% unredeemably despicable. I mean, he flat out lies to Ernest so that Ernest will convince the chief to because he has sent his lawyer. Do you have Crater's attorney, Mr. Elliot Blatz, played by Buck Ford. Sends his attorney several times to speak to the chief and his granddaughter, and every time they turn him down, with, who really owns this land? I will say that might not be the argument you want to use, because then Crater would just be like, oh, so you don't really own the land. Cool.
Yeah, so let's check the title of that, because if you're just saying you don't have it, then why have I told you
who can own the land? I thought you did.
Yeah. If you don't, then we'll make a different claim.
He tries to obviously Crater tries to appeal to the chief, not realizing that he doesn't speak English. Tries to, just tempt him with money, and he can't hear. I will say, once Ernest gets on, comes in and shows that he knows how to communicate with the chief, he just straight goes into lying mode.
Yeah, he does.
Doesn't try. He's like, you know what? This guy's not going to listen to money. He in fact tells him that he wants him to sign a petition to keep the mining company away. And I'm like, Ernest, are you not looking at this contract at all?
And the thing is, moments later,
see the Crater mining company on it? Yes.
Ernest is looking over Iron Eye's shoulder at, sitting next to him, looking at him, pointing where to sign. He's clearly is capable of reading it.
But he's apparently not paying much attention to it.
But he's apparently not reading anything about it. I will say that like you said, in that scene, John Vernon finally just resorts to out and out lying. I appreciated that up till that point, frankly, unlike what I would expect from an 80s comedy like this, the Crater Company honestly seemed to play it straight with Iron Eyes Cody. When his lawyer shows up, they're not hiding the ball on what they're doing. It's like, we want to mine for petricite on your land. You have it. We would like to take a lease on it, and we will pay you a percentage of the revenue from what we
as you mentioned, lease it. They're not even looking to buy it.
No, they're not even looking to buy it.
They're just looking to pay a lease on it.
Yeah, they're looking to pay a lease on it. It's implied that they're probably gonna need to
I mean, honestly, by the time that land they're done with it, it's not going to be worth a whole lot.
There's not much you can do with it at that point, to be fair.
No.
Honestly, if Cody wanted to do this, he would negotiate for more than 5%. But at the same time, it's it's not Crater's job in negotiation to offer more than 5% up front. That's the back and forth of it all.
Right.
I said, in these kind of movies, I expect for them to be more out and out dishonest in what they're playing.
Right.
His attorney's being straightforward, this is the proposal. Would you like to consider it?
I do because you are a lawyer, legitimately. So I you have that, obviously you have that perspective. I mean, I would be interested because you mentioned we mentioned before about they obviously they are hoodwinked into signing this whole thing, and then they try to get a restraining order. They get one within a day, which I'm like, wow, that seems quick to me. But I would like your perspective on a little bit more of kind of the legal things that go into. Obviously, it's a movie. There's going to be a little bit of shortcuts, but that's what is your perspective of how well they actually do with the legal things going?
One, assuming, of course, like we said a second ago, that that Iron Eyes Cody does actually own the land. That the grandfather, St. Cloud,
Chief
owns
St.
the
Cloud,
land.
yeah.
Because if he wants to disclaim ownership, that's creates a problem for him. In respect. The biggest, it's not a mistake exactly, because again, the lawyer's playing it straight early on. The lawyer's not there when Vernon shows up and decides to lie to Ernest.
No.
Because the fact that they get the injunction restraining order there at the end, that they call it a restraining order.
Yeah.
And
they hold it up like it is a trophy. Yeah.
It suggests that goes to reflect that what Vernon did was wrong. But yeah, immediately when Vernon is straight up lying about who he is and what this contract does, that straight up make whatever St. Cloud signs is just going to be voidable. If it's illegal, outright void from the beginning.
Right.
And after that's what the contract's going.
And you get kind of the feeling that he knows this, but he's hoping that they can take action quickly enough that they can actually get, I guess, at least some mind before it is voided.
But the thing is, I'm not sure what you would be hoping to accomplish in that short a period of time. Because, you were surprised by the speed at which they could do that, but you could actually turn around that maybe not same day, to be fair. But you could certainly try to. Depending on how fast you can get in front of a judge, and depending again on how fast Crater is moving. Because if Crater is already moving, vehicles and stuff in and is planning on tearing stuff down, then you would get in front of a judge and be asking for some kind of emergency injunction to prevent them from taking action, because you are within hours of suffering harm.
Right.
And you would argue that Crater is not, going to be, harmed by having some short temporary injunction in place while the court can sort out the legality of whatever transfer has been. But if they do go forward, you will suffer immensely. It honestly does not surprise me that they could get legal action that quickly, and that the court would step in and say, the Crater has to stop. Granted, what the court's not going to do that quickly is straight up say that Kikiki wins.
I think they actually just said a restraint. It sounded to me like it wasn't done, but they had basically an injunction keeping them from continuing work.
They call it a restraining order, but then they immediately celebrate as if they've won. So it's technically not.
I mean, I think that at that point, probably the lawyer has explained to them that it's only a matter of time, because
it absolutely will be. Yes. I mean, again, that's the shorthand for the film, because they are going to win. The contract was fraudulent. Ernest can testify that it was fraudulent. Iron Eyes Cody can testify that it was fraudulent. The attorney, was it Blick? Blatt's attorney, Blatt's. He would be able to testify the previous conversations he's had with Iron Eyes Cody, who's flat up rejected these proposals before, and they're having to change. No, the contract is not going to survive.
No, there's no way.
And the thing is, it seems surprising that it would be. You mentioned that they would get in and start trying to mine, but it's a mining operation. What's the most they're going to be able to accomplish in the first 24 hours?
I was going to say, they've just set up camp.
Yeah, they've set up camp. They might be able to, as happens in the film, tear down some buildings, but you're not going to get much further than that.
I was about to say, I want to go ahead and talk about this situation, because, like I said, the chief is tricked into signing over the land. The camp is immediately instructed, and like I said, that grinds the camp storyline to a halt. They are informed that they have to get out of there by the next day, basically. So I will say, during this time, Ernest and the kids have started to become closer. Obviously, he's closest with Moose, but they at least kind of like him enough that, he's like, we're not going to take this line down. Basically, he tells them that he's going to go fight them to get it stopped. And they're just like, yeah, Ernest, because, that's how kids react when you tell them that you're going to go beat some people up. They're just like, oh, that sounds cool. Not understanding the full ramifications of what that would actually look like, even if Ernest actually could, do that. But he is immediately disposed of by Crater's foreman, who is played by Lyle Alzado, who was mostly known for being a player in the NFL. At least in this picture, he played for the Raiders, looks like. But he also, I believe, had some other acting roles and things like that. Let's see. He played for the Broncos, the Browns, and the Raiders. He did a little bit of acting. He had a guest appearance on the Super Mario Brothers Super Show with
Captain
Lou
Lou
Albano as Mario, which blows my mind. But he had some and also apparently played himself in an episode of Small Wonder. So, a lot of stuff during this same time, actually. But in
all
this
things I have watched, honestly.
Oh, yeah, me too, absolutely. But he is, 100% plays the part of a bully and just kicks the crap out of Ernest. And like to the point where even the construction workers start feeling bad for Ernest.
Yeah, actually, to touch back on the legal aspects, he absolutely has committed crimes there. Like he has assaulted Ernest several times over.
Yes, it's pretty bad, and it's then that in the next scene we see basically Nurse St. Cloud taking care of him because basically she knew that it had to be him that convinced the chief to sign the document because he's the only other one that can speak to him. And of course she's coming down hard on him, but she doesn't know that he was lied to. He at no point does he tell people, because I feel like all of this could have been cleared up actually pretty quickly had that been explained earlier.
Sitcom lack of communication things.
Of course.
I should say, it's like the man told me like he was like trying to stop a development.
Right, which actually is what spurs Ernest to try to take matters into his own hands. I will say, unfortunately, and I actually like Victoria Racimo in this film in a few things, but unfortunately, she's made to look rather sanctimonious in a few different scenes. Basically, her role with the Second Chance Boys is to basically be this is what you're doing wrong right now, boys. Give those speeches. And it's like, okay, it just comes across as really cheesy and, like I said, very sanctimonious. And it's not a role that is, it doesn't do her any favors to have to fill that role in.
The role could have been developed a little more for her. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I actually enjoy her and her interactions with Ernest. I think that they're actually kind of fun together, especially because he's slightly flirtatious with her in that Ernest way.
I was gonna say there's a passing reference. I don't have confirmation of this, but in the IMDb trivia that at one point there was discussion about making the film end with her as a love interest for Ernest.
Sure, and
someone nixed this.
There are other situations in other Ernest films where he is given light love interests. It's never depicted that they are in love with him, but he is often like acting like he's a ladies' man and he's gonna wine them and dine them and all that kind of good stuff. But obviously it's just Ernest bravado, and there's nothing harmful behind it. He's just,
frankly, it would have added some meat to that final ending.
Sure.
Just feels like we're just going to tie everything up here.
Also, it would have given her a little bit more. I mean, you could argue that it also wouldn't have been great if that was all that her character was as well. Was his love interest.
It would be helpful if she was a little more involved in the final act and in the final action of the film to save the camp as well.
I mean, ultimately, she is the one who saved the camp because she got
that's true. She got the restraining order. Yes. I would like to point out something actually too. Is like this feels like the opportunity to say so. Yeah. Is by the way, in addition to the other contract stuff from before, other issues is I'm not even aside from the fraud, I'm not sure it would be enforceable because there hadn't been any consideration at the time of the exchange. Like all he's done is just sign the paper. He could just retract. Like, well, he could immediately turn around once there's been some action. It'd be a little more difficult. But but yeah, there's been no consideration given to Cody thus far. He hasn't been paid any money. And also the fact that they're moving in the next day, like Vernon walks in with the same contract he's had before. Like he, presumably. I was about to say
the Tipton basically acts like he's got a notice of eviction.
Tipton does, yes, exactly, he does. It's an immediate take possession, whatever it is. But when Vernon shows up to propose all this, he's still trying to propose. We want a lease. We will give you a percentage of it. None of which would, in a normal relationship prior, would have implied we start tomorrow. We start mining tomorrow. You're running a camp there. Like, it's not urgent for them to get on the land. The contract he walks in the room with would have said, we will start at some point in the future.
Of course, all of this is done through, the need for...
Again, there'll be some kind of closing.
Right, exactly. To give some urgency, right.
But yes, the role the nurse played in getting the restraining order, what this actually means at the end of the day, given the amount of time it took her to get that she basically returns weirdly already. Well, I guess the cops are there to stop the mining. But it's same day. The mining hadn't started yet. They didn't, other than one bulldozer. It's not clear how many vehicles they even had there to start the mining. In other words, had Ernest done nothing and the kids had done nothing, so she would have just rolled in there at lunchtime with a restraining order and everything would be fine. The end result of Ernest doing everything he does in the final, act of this film was just to destroy the buildings. That's the only thing that actually benefited from this.
So basically what you're arguing is that Ernest is Indiana Jones.
Oh, the old Raiders of the Lost Ark joke.
Right. Which honestly, I have a huge issue with because
I do too.
I'm like, you're right. Everything with the Ark would have been the same, but had Indy not been involved, Karen Allen would have been raped and probably murdered. Are we not concerned with her at all? No? Great.
Also, it implies that the Nazis still aren't going to find the staff at some point, which they still could, to be fair. So they're not going to just stop. But no, here Ernest's actions directly led to all the cabins being destroyed.
I do wonder. I'm like, and with the cops showing up directly after they have destroyed private property, does that kind of muddy these waters? A little bit.
But again, Vernon's got to be mainly concerned with the attempted murder charges.
It's true. At this point, yes, they have destroyed private property, but he has tried to murder a person.
To be fair, at the same time, they're juveniles, so it's less of a problem for them. But Ernest and the kids have also basically committed assault on all those guys.
Oh, 100%. I mean, we haven't explicitly said, but basically, after a few other things, when Ernest's attempt fail, when everybody else is ready to leave the camp, Ernest and some of the other campers dismantle a bus, by the way. Make it kind of a war wagon and create basically a bunch of before Home Alone. Home Alone.
It's very Home, in my opinion, very Home Alone 2, because Home Alone, at least those were mostly like we'll call it injury. Home Alone 2 was it will repeatedly kill you.
Yes, yes. But some Home Alone-esque weapons that they unleash on all of these construction workers. But yeah,
they launched a crate full of smoke bombs, like inside a crate, and then launched an exploding toilet.
An exploding toilet, which, I mean, they launch a flaming arrows into a box that says explosives.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, they you know, it looked like nobody actually died, but not these poor children. Yeah, if not, they could have been charged with manslaughter at the very least. You know,
it's entirely possible there is a dead body there. We just don't see it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you know, obviously all of the weapons that they use against them are callbacks to various jokes that happen throughout, honestly, mostly in the Ernest vignettes that we see throughout the film. The flying turtles that then bite, which not obviously they probably wouldn't have used snapping turtles, but those types of turtles don't bite.
Yes.
That's not
incidentally in the special thanks in the credits. There's special thanks given to a turtle rodeo, who I assume
provided the turtles. Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, there's, you know, obviously all of this stuff is fun. It's fun to see the all of the various things that they hurl at the construction workers. That, I mean, you know, it's played very much, honestly, very much like Home Alone. Again, this is pre-Home Alone. You gotta wonder if John Hughes was paying attention, had seen this movie, or Chris Columbus, because, you know, there's some stuff that feels a little reminiscent. But you know, obviously, you know, it's fun to kind of see these pranks and all of these things take place. And, you know, like you said, it really doesn't mean a whole lot. It does, like, as you mentioned, the foreman then decides to get on the big bulldozer, which before this, they basically make it look like all of the construction workers have been run off. And then all of a sudden, the guy comes in with the bulldozer, and I think he flattens over half the camp.
Yeah.
So, and then like scenes later, they're all back for the end of camp. I'm like,
which is implied to be like days later at the most.
Yes. Yeah. I'm like, did we have a quick barn raising to build some new buildings, or are we just like double bunking at this point? Like, what? Because he at least destroyed a couple of which obviously it's there, you know, to lend to, you know, the destruction or whatever. But he destroys a building with a vending machine on it. There would be some action from the vending machine company for destroying their property.
Separate claims for that, obviously.
Sure. But yeah, you know, all of that stuff is resolved.
Yeah.
I do, though, want to go back because we did skip over one of the most memorable parts of this film, because in a lot of ways, and granted, obviously this film is the first Ernest film, so they haven't yet set the template. I will say that the template really isn't set, and honestly doesn't really even hold. The most kind of template films that they have, Ernest Goes to Jail and Ernest Scared Stupid, feel like they follow the same template.
Yep.
You know, there's a lot of the same recurring things in both of those films.
Well, you mentioned before that, like the later films, Varney starts playing other characters. He'll bounce into, you know,
right? Yes,
Noldy and some stuff like that. There's none of that here.
No, this film, I think, is more unlike any of the other films.
Yeah.
Because, as you mentioned, there's no Varney playing other characters. I mean, he is doing a lot of the vignettes, and
he
things
does
like
voices
that.
occasionally.
Yes, he is, getting to yeah, and he's, this was the first time I had ever heard of Charles Lindbergh and the Lindbergh baby, because he makes that reference when he's getting a shot. I will say he several times references, talking about tough men, and he's always like, men that have never tasted quiche. I will say, when I was a child, quiche was a regular meal that my mother would cook. And I was like, what's wrong with quiche? I like quiche. It's good. But yeah, I always thought that was weird. But yeah, there are a lot of things that will become normal in later Ernest films that aren't done in this one, like you mentioned, the characters and things like that. And there's also a looseness to the plot in this one that I don't think is as present in, I mean, they're Ernest films. They're not as much about the plot, but there's a little bit more of a consistent plot in more of those than there is in this
not
one.
a Christopher Nolan Ernest movie.
Right. But another big difference, this is the only film in which Ernest sings a song. And this is, obviously he sings this right after having confronted the construction workers, and he gets beaten up, and he's, being tended to by Nurse St. Cloud. And he basically just starts talking about how he just, his entire life is being taken away from him right now. And, he starts to sing this song. And I mean, I will say, I remembered it a little bit through rose-colored glasses. But I remember really loving this song. And I still think that it's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I will say I have a distinct memory. First time I ever saw this film was not with my family. It was actually at my daycare. It was towards the end of the day. And I distinctly remember watching this movie and hearing one of my teachers, this was like pre-K, one of my teachers saying, he's got a pretty voice. And then I watched this film not long, like maybe it might have even been like a week later with my family. As a kid, you have no real sense of time. A week can seem like months or years, But yeah, I remember watching this movie, getting to this song, and, making the same statement. And obviously I'm mimicking, but I, as a kid, do remember thinking, I like this song. This is a good song. And I remember saying, he's got a pretty voice. And being kind of, and I don't remember who it was, but having at least one or two members of my family kind of poking fun at me and kind of not outright saying it, but kind of making a reference like, that's a gay thing to say, kind of thing. Yeah. And like now I'm just like, wow, that's really, like, number one, it's a song.
Mm-hmm.
And a child just mimicking what he's heard his teacher say.
Yeah.
Why are we coming down on this, homophobia right now? But yeah, it's weird reaction that I just, is in the back of my mind. Like I said, I can't even remember who it was that said it, but I do remember someone in my family giving me that distinct impression that I shouldn't have expressed that idea. And I just remember thinking, why? That's kind of dumb. But yeah, I will say, and I do want to play a little bit of it, and we will in a second. But rewatching it again, you can get a glimpse of Varney's theatrical training, because if you pay attention, he sings a lot of it with what distinctly sounds like a British accent. Yeah. And you know, I think, I'm not saying that Jim Varney should have been a recording artist or anything like that, but I think for Ernest and for this moment in the film, the performance is exactly what it needs to be. And it's also accompanied, of course, with a montage of all of the kids, and even, Counselor Tipton, packing up and looking sad and, all this kind of stuff. But I do just briefly want to go ahead and share this. So give me just a second here. All right. I'm gonna do a bit.
Thanks, kid. It's everything to me.
You can hear it, right? Can you hear it?
Gee, I'm glad it's raining. There's always something to be thankful for.
Yeah, you hear it on that 4? Yeah.
I'm awfully glad it's raining, 'cause no one sees your teardrops when it pours. And no one knows the thunder is your heartbreak in disguise. They think the rainy nights what put that sad look in your eyes. Sure, I'm glad it's raining.
And this song, along with a lot, I believe most, if not all of the others, were written by
I'm glad the stars aren't shining.
Shane Keister, and I believe his wife also
needs a place to hide.
worked on this one.
I thought I had found someone I could count on till the end.
Of course, I can't find the
What
names
they
when I need
wanted
them.
was a hero. All I needed was a friend. Gee, I'm glad it's raining. I hope the morning sun won't come up soon.
And I mean, there are moments in this that actually, like, I love that moment. That sounds very much like something from a country song.
No one
kind of thing.
knows my heart broke right in two. I thought I had found someone
so
I could count on.
all of the songs,
till the
unless noted,
end.
were written by Alice and
What they
Shane
wanted
Keister.
was
So
a hero.
I would
All I
assume a
needed
husband and wife team.
Was a friend.
But yeah, like I said,
Sure,
not
I'm
necessarily a
glad
song
it's
that's gonna
raining.
be nominated or even win at the Oscars.
Yeah.
But it is a song that I think really fits the tone of the film, especially in this moment. And I don't think that it even slows down the film at this time. I think it actually allows the film to be sad for a second.
Yeah, it's a very melancholy song.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it actually does a very good job of setting the mood in a time when it is necessary. So it does kind of beg the question, why did they never have Ernest sing any more songs?
Yeah.
This would be a question I'd be interested to ask someone that might know, because again, like I'm saying, I'm not saying that Jim Varney should have had a music career or anything like that, but I think for what this was, and especially like if he could have sung like a fun song in an Ernest film, that would have been a fun way to kind of move this around. I wonder if maybe Jim just decided he didn't want to do any more songs, or maybe they just never found another good place for a song. Like I said, all of these songs were written by Alice and Shane Keister. Perhaps I don't know if they did any more work with them beyond.
I could imagine working in another
this
serious another serious song, if you care to say Ernest song. into
Sure.
Ernest Saves Christmas. That it would probably work thematically there. Beyond that,
I
the
think he
movie,
could have done like a fun, silly one, maybe in
that's what I was gonna say. You get
in
later on, and you
Ernest
just have to move to a
Scared
different style of
Stupid,
song. Yeah, I mean,
or
you
you
just
could
get
have
something
done another sad
fun.
one in Ernest Goes to Jail. Could you imagine like him doing like a
While
jailhouse
in
ballad
jail,
or something like that? That would have been great.
while
I
he's
mean,
locked up. Yeah,
maybe with a little tongue in cheek in
yeah,
there, but like with some harmonica playing or something like that, like maybe some sort of prison tune.
yeah,
That could have been great. So
yeah.
I mean, I will say I'm looking at this, and it mentions that he specifically did the scores for Dr. Otto and the Riddle of the Gloom Beam and
Yeah.
Ernest Goes to Camp, but does not mention him working on any
Okay.
Ernest films after that. So perhaps that's why that they just never worked with, because it might have, because there are a lot of songs written for this film. Again, a lot of them were done more, in just asides, as more like a soundtrack kind of thing. But they wrote the doing time, the thing that Jackie Welch sings as they pull up to the second chance thing. And that just feels like a needle drop where
Yeah.
you drop an actual song, they also wrote the song that they sing that plays while they're doing the TP again. And that one was sang by Ashley Cleveland. Again, feels like a needle drop where you put a real song, not necessarily one written for the film. And the song that plays over the credits, Bravehearts, was also written for the film. That one sung by Gary Chapman, the ex-husband of Amy Grant. So, I mean, you can tell that they've got a lot of Nashville ties here.
Yeah.
But
by the way, as you were playing it a second ago, the thing that GM Glad Training reminds me of, in terms of just the structure of the song and all, it reminds me suddenly of I'm Going to Go Back There Someday, Gonzo's song from the Muppet movie.
Yeah, I can kind of, and that is one of my all-time favorite songs. I love that song. But yeah, I mean, I will say, I think we've talked a lot about this film. Is there anything that you feel like we need to touch on before we finish?
I'll hit some quick bullet points from stuff that I wasn't able to work in before. One, I like the running gag at the golf cart. Just
because it literally is a running gag. It is a golf cart that runs throughout the film. Yeah.
And I do like the fact that it actually pays off as a Deus Ex Machina in the last act. That suddenly the fact that it's been running around actually does mean something,
because it helps them blow up the bulldozer.
The bulldozer. Yeah. So that was fun. I kind of wish, again, as long as I'm rewriting the third act here, even if we're going to keep it the same, where they launch stuff over at them. Yeah. Personally, I just wish it had been a trebuchet.
Sure.
Because one, that would be it looked more realistic as they launch stuff, and two, that feels more like it's a camp. Like, teach the boys to build a trebuchet. Like, it's an actual weapon of war.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily fit into Native American culture, though.
Not so much, no. But it's treated as a big craft. I mean, the bus was not Native American culture either.
Which I'm like, how much trouble did they get into after the camp was saved with the camp for literally they did also cannibalizing an entire bus?
Yeah. I would like to note that we've had a very lengthy discussion here, and to demonstrate just how ancillary they were to the plot, we have not once brought up
I will say I do plan to speak on that. Yes. But yes, we did not mention Eddie and Jake, played by Gellert Sartain and Daniel Butler. Daniel Butler, you might remember as playing the smiley-faced robot in
that was him. I saw he was in that film. I couldn't remember who. He also he went on to host America's Dumbest Criminals for several seasons. Like, he created
okay.
Yeah. But yeah,
and Gaylord Sartain, we will see in a few of the
we'll
subsequent
see him several more
films.
times. Yeah,
Yeah.
and he had an extensive career.
Yeah. Oh
yeah.
yeah.
Daniel Butler mentioned again, I don't have confirmation on this, that he joined the production really late. And then they were
okay.
like suggest to him, it's like do a Thurston Howell the third impression from Gilligan's Island.
I was gonna say, because it's a weird accent that
It's
he's
a bizarre
doing.
accent, but yeah, if you listen to
especially
it,
for that character, I never would have thought Thurston Howell.
he is doing an
Never
exaggerated
would have thought
Thurston
Jim
Howell
Backus.
third, which it's hard to pin down because he's not doesn't look like Thurston Howell.
No, yeah, I mean he's in a lumberjack hat for
Yeah.
crying out loud.
It gave me
and
some,
like a
Bob
Hawaiian
and Doug
shirt.
McKenzie vibes a little bit.
Yes, yeah. It's a weird choice.
But they are, I guess Gaylord's worked in better when it's him and Bobby in the other movies, but in this one they are super ancillary. They show up in the last act to help, but they never even interact with the other actors. They're gone from
honestly, with the exception of one scene that they have with Ernest.
Yeah.
I feel like all of their stuff was probably shot separately, probably all in the same day.
You might be right about that. You're right. They interact with Ernest once. I think are they serving food at some point to the kid? Are they in that scene?
Yes, yes, they are in that cafeteria scene. They are, because they mention, because Chip Osgood mentions that the food doesn't smell too bad, and then they mention, the other kids mention, he wants a 2 pounds of modeling clay, which I will say that's my other thing about Chip Osgood, is other than the 1 or 2 times that they do reference his intelligence, occasionally he's just a fat joke, which I'm like, wish we didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
But,
speaking of Chip Osgood, though, I noticed at one point when Ernest comes up to the kids and is trying to raise their spirits or whatever, Chip is reading a comic book. So being a comic book nerd, I was obsessed with identifying that comic book.
Nice. Did you figure it out?
I identified it. It is an issue of Who's Who in the DC Universe number 8.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yes, he is specifically looking at the profiles for the Aquaman villain, the Fisherman, and the Golden Age Flash.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay. That is nerdy. That is very nerdy. Good for you, sir.
Thank you.
Wow. All right.
I'm going to add that to the IMDb trivia page. Yeah. Oh, also, talking about the kids here, segue from talking about the kids. I mentioned earlier there was something else that the delinquent kids did that was bad.
Right.
And this was, in my opinion, possibly even more mean-spirited than pushing over the lifeguard, but less likely to get them kicked out.
Sure.
In my opinion, it's probably the worst thing they do ethically.
You're talking about the Guess Who?
No.
Okay. Yeah, because that was dangerous and stupid.
Which was that again?
When they're driving back to the camp and Crutchfield puts his hand over Ernest's eyes.
That's reckless. That's pretty bad. Yeah, to be fair, that is bad. But they're also endangering themselves in that weird.
Yes, which is why I'm like, that's just stupid, guys.
That's just dumb. Yeah. No, the thing to me that feels the most actively mean-spirited in the entire film, which they
Poison
get
Ivy
seemingly
gag.
no comeuppance for, is when they give Poison Ivy to Ernest for seemingly no reason. Like, it's like he's been nice to them throughout the film, and he's just been injured, and they go to him and give him Poison Ivy.
Right. And this is another situation where somebody calls Ernest a jerk.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, has the definition for the word jerk changed since the 80s? Because both times that he's been called a jerk, it makes no sense to me, especially not in this movie.
Yeah.
The last time we mentioned it was in the commercials, and granted, occasionally there were some where he was a little out of character from what I'm used to Ernest being. But in this, he is 100% the Ernest that I am used to. Yeah. The try hard, will do anything for you, is only ever has your best interest at heart, Ernest.
And if this was something they did to Ernest in like the first act of the film, like after they're introduced, it's like they're annoyed that Ernest is trying to like get on their good side. They do this to him. That's fine. I'll deal with that. But this is like near the end of Act 2, after he spent all this time.
Yeah, I will say there are no reason. Yeah, there are a couple of things. I feel like a lot of this stuff was filmed with no particular order, and they just kind of decided where to put it in the editing room. Because yes, some of the scenes, the sequence really doesn't make sense. I mean, you mentioned Jake and Eddie. The first scene that we see of them in the cafeteria, they mention Eggserroneous, make it sound like they crapped it. The very next scene, they've made Eggserroneous. And then in the very next scene, when they're dealing with the their machine or whatever that like makes a bunch of different things, they're like, this might bring us one step closer to making Eggserroneous.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
and then the,
just made Eggserroneous.
It's also the credit tag scene when they actually pull it off. But
yeah. So I because there was nowhere in that scene. Obviously, Ernest thinks it's gross, but there's nowhere in that scene that they're like, this isn't right. This isn't Eggserroneous.
Also, the time they give it to Ernest is the one time they explain everything that's in it, and it's like it is specifically powdered eggs, 17 herbs and spices. Which doesn't sound great, but also doesn't sound horrible.
Yeah.
So, like, there needs to be something else. Like, there needs to be like fish or something in that thing to make it viscerally terrible,
disgusting. Yeah.
And yeah,
I mean, they do mention that they're gonna want to use modeling clay in it.
Yeah, so, that comes up later. Yeah, exactly.
It was smuggled into the country by Tibetan monks.
Nice,
Tibetan monks. Yeah.
But no, again, I want to stress the poison ivy thing just really.
Yeah, no, that I mean, I will say that is the first sanctimonious speech that we get from Nurse St. Cloud.
Yeah,
that actually probably should have gotten some more things. I will say a couple of things about that. Number one, Nurse St. Cloud does mention that Ernest is going to need another shot because of it.
He does, yeah.
But also, that is the one scene. Bobby Wayne is conspicuously absent. Every other one of the children of the second chance kids are there, but Bobby Wayne, seemingly their ringleader, is not. And I just thought that was a really weird choice. I was like, if anyone shouldn't be there, because Moose does not take part, he obviously seems to not agree with the course of action that the other children have taken.
Yeah.
But he is in the scene outside of the nurse's office as they do that. And then they meet up with him and like, what do you think this is funny kind of thing? Yeah. But I was like, was he sick that day? Was he just not available? Was he filming a different scene that they thought was more important? Like, why was he not there? But yeah, I thought that was interesting. But yeah, I mean, is there anything else before we move on to segments?
No, we can move on to segments. That's all I have.
All right. Then I think it is time to go ahead and move forward with our segments. Let's start with our moment. This is, of course, the moment in the film that was either your favorite or the one that you at least just thought was the most interesting. So, Loren, what is your moment?
Okay, that's an easy call. It's gee, I'm glad it's raining. I love the song. I love Jim Varney's performance of it. It's a different beat that's played here than in any of the other Ernest movies, and it is.
Like I said, it is completely different from anything. I will say this film strikes a serious tone that I don't think is replicated in any other Ernest film.
I think you're probably right. Yeah.
I think it gets darker. I don't think in any other film do we actually see Ernest get beaten up. Like it gets pretty dark at certain places.
Yeah.
And yeah, I kind of like it for that.
Yeah. And I think given what I've read about, in the development of the film, their concern, and Jim Varney's concern for a while there of thinking anyone would want to watch an hour, 90 minutes of his TV commercial character who people are used to seeing for like 30 seconds at a time.
Yeah.
It is an interesting direction, and it pays off very well to then use this commercial character to play such a sort of soulful, melancholy beat as to give him this song.
Sure.
And it works perfectly. And at the end of the day, it was just I like the song. I honestly planned at some point to pull out my little banjo lele or something like that and like record it for TikTok or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, you know, once it's in your, like, I mean, I listened to the other day in anticipation of watching this movie. I was just like, I want to hear that song. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm gonna give it to the same thing, because I absolutely do as well. I love that song. It is a great moment. And I think one of the most memorable moments in all Ernest films, I would say.
Absolutely.
It's great. It's really good. So then moving on, we have the Neldy Award, which is of course given to, again, our favorite or most interesting character. So Loren, who would you like to give your Neldy Award to?
Okay, so on the one hand, I'd kind of like to give it to Nurse St. Cloud, at least in theory.
Sure.
But like her character at the end of the day was just really underdeveloped.
Not super well used. And like I said, the sanctimonious speeches don't hold up as well as you might like.
And the actress did fine, but
Yeah.
she didn't.
She wasn't given a whole lot.
Knocked it out of the park, then maybe, but Ms. Racimo didn't leave that much of an impression to elevate the material in it anyway. So yeah, it can't be her. I mean, John Vernon's tempting in this respect. In some respects, I kind of like what Daniel Butler is doing with his character.
It is a choice.
He's swinging.
I mean, I will say I did not know that was supposed to be. I mean, it doesn't sound that much like Jim Backus to me, but the accent now makes more sense.
Yeah,
and honestly gives me more of an appreciation for what he's doing, because honestly, to me, that pairing has always been an aberration, because as much as I love this movie, I'm always just like, oh, I don't care about this pairing, because what I really like is, him and Bobby.
Yeah.
I like
it makes
Bobby.
A little more sense, like I said, if it's true that he was brought in basically as the shooting is starting and being told, here is what we need you to do.
Sure.
We need to do an impression you don't already know.
You do wonder who was the original choice. I hope it wasn't
Bill Burge.
But yeah, Bill Burge, and that maybe he got sick, and because it would have been, of course, I don't know. I feel like this role would have required, at least the way that it was done, more talking than we're used to from Bill Burge. So I don't know if I would have liked that. I think they would have had to change the role if Bobby.
Oh yeah, exactly. So this is a long build up to me saying that I think when you say favorite or most interesting character, I'm gonna have to go, and this is not just for professional reasons, with attorney Elliot Blatz.
Okay,
because at the beginning, when he's introduced, I'm going to assume he is going to be a stereotypical 80s movie villain that he's just going to ride in there.
Marmy, unethical. Yes.
He is going to mislead the St. Clouds as to what he's planning to do here. He is just going to be basically a legal grifter to do whatever his boss tells him. And no, from the very beginning, it's like he seems to be an upstanding, ethical guy. He works for someone.
I was about to say, aside from the fact that he is representing Crater, which it's a job. That's not his fault.
He's a corporate attorney.
Actually,
he works for
a very ethical, knows the law, and he basically tries to convince Crater that they should leave the camp alone. He tells him several times, we're on very shaky ground here legally.
Yeah.
There's should also not be doing this.
He has that conversation with Crater. We have a scene with him just like looking at the land with the St. Clouds.
Sure.
He could do a little more when his client's trying to shoot a man there at the very end. But
yeah. I mean, I will say it is kind of a nice moment at the end when he's like, kind of like, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, when Crater gets taken in. I mean,
Exactly.
I'm assuming he's not his criminal lawyer.
Yeah, no. He is a corporate attorney.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, in let's just be honest, in 80s films, he would have been every type of lawyer.
exactly. He would have been every type of lawyer. And
Yeah.
and the thing, in other 80s movies, he just would have been a corrupt, greedy, willing to lie at the drop of a hat. And here
Right.
he isn't. And
Yeah.
I was just pleasantly surprised from the first time we get that, that he's
Yeah.
not. He's actually
No.
trying to be good and responsible in his job.
Yeah. Agreed.
And Vernon's the one who's the bad guy here.
Yeah, which I mean, you make me think about it. I'd already thought about it, but you make me think about it more by referring to him as this. But isn't it funny that in Ernest's first film, the actor who plays the lead villain, his last name is Vernon.
Yes.
That's just kind of great. The only way it could have been better is if his last name was just straight up Vern. But I mean, even in this film, Ernest refers to Vern as Vernon.
Kind of meta joke here, honestly.
Sure.
They dropped it.
Yeah. I mean, but even like I said, even in the campfire story, Ernest calls Vernon. Calls him Vernon. So yeah. Okay, so for mine, I will say I followed very similar pathways to you, but opposite. So I actually considered and I'm gonna give at least an honorable mention to Gaylord Sartain. Because it's his first appearance in an Ernest film. And he's, I mean, yes, he and Eddie, they don't serve a whole lot to the plot, but they really never do. I think the closest they get to actually serving much to the plot is in Ernest Goes to Jail. They're always a side thing. So we might not mention them a lot when we're recapping the plot, but we're always going to mention it when, eventually, because their parts are always fun. And I think that what he does here is a lot of fun. They introduce the back and forth thing that he does with his eyes, along with my favorite thing that they do with him in these films is add the sound effect to it. The sound effect that they do when he does his eye thing. It's great. There's no way I could even try.
Yeah.
But you feel like that was a skill that he mastered after years. The way that he darts his eyes back and forth, but it's great. But like I said, not who I ultimately picked. Because I do feel like he's going to have better moments with Bobby in later films. I actually picked John Vernon.
Okay.
Because for the same reasons that we mentioned before, he is coming into this smaller film and he is taking it seriously, and he's playing a villain that he could have played theatrically, over the top, just, screaming every other word and flailing around, chewing the scenery if he wanted to. But no, he is playing it very measured. And yes, he raises his voice, but he is a very realistic villain in a very non-realistic film.
Yeah.
And yes, he ends it by trying to resolve a mining dispute by shooting a man. And I will say, at least he picked the only adult among them and didn't try to shoot the children. Right?
Try to shoot yes.
But even that scene, I will tell you, one of my favorite bits, because he he does the thing where, when he first tries to shoot Ernest, he's like 20, 30 feet away.
Mm-hmm.
Then like every shot that he takes, he steps closer and closer. So by the last time, he's literally raising his gun up to this far away from Ernest's face, and Ernest just puts his finger in the gun and goes, paper, rock, scissors. Does that whole little Ernest thing. And I love his reaction, because he's just like, what? He just looks at him and he just kind of like reacts, and then he just kind of like he takes the gun and he drops it, but he doesn't just drop it, he goes like, ew. Like just the reaction there is great, because it's not just a drop. It's a like, oh, what did you just do kind of thing. It's great. I love that reaction. I love that choice there. I love all of the choice. And I do think that he lended a credibility to this film. And I think that he's one of the big reasons why it did well, why it was taken seriously, at least by the people who did take it seriously. You know, I think that he is a big reason why this film works. And so, yeah, I am giving John Vernon as Sherman Crater my Neldy Award.
And what you had to say about him doing sort of a more grounded performance here as opposed to what he could have done. The contrast that comes to mind is the corporate boss that Kevin McCarthy plays in UHF.
Okay, yeah. Sure.
Imagining that kind of exaggerated performance in this movie. I can see how the contrast.
Sure.
And how what Vernon's doing here is valuable.
Yeah. I was also thinking of Kurt Fuller in No Holds Barred. Mm-hmm. The television executive that he plays in that. Have you ever seen that movie?
I don't think I have, no.
That is over the top. I will say, though, for that film, because it's the first film starring Hulk Hogan, I will say for that film, I think it actually works, him being over the top. Yeah. He also keeps calling him a basically using some version of the term jock strap, but it calls him a jock itch, or I can't remember exactly the term that he uses, but it's weird. But yeah, I think that it definitely was a completely different performance here that John Vernon turned in, and I think for this film it really worked, and I like what he did here. So yeah. But yeah, so now it is time for the last question, the most important question, the question so important that Ernest never stopped asking it. And that is, when it comes to Ernest Goes to Camp, Loren, do you or do you not know what he means, Vern?
I do.
Yeah.
I've criticized a bunch of aspects of the film. There are obviously ways it can be improved upon, but at the end of the day, it's charming. Jim Varney successfully translated the character to film in a way you wouldn't expect, like again, a commercial property to a commercial character to be able to do.
Sure.
And it's not high art. It got mentioned in Justin Lloyd's book that when like John Cherry, the reviews at this at the time weren't super positive. And John Cherry's response was just like, we're not trying to have any high artistic.
I was about to say they're not right. They're not making this for critics.
Yeah, we're not.
I will say, I know some critics actually that do enjoy this film.
Yeah. What one of the lines quoted in the book was that like kids buy more movie tickets than critics do. But yeah, they're making this movie like explicitly. It's a commercial endeavor. They don't have artistic aspirations for this.
No.
And on that front, it's successful, and it's funny in the places it needs to be funny, and it's again, I like the song. It's touching.
I think there's a great balance to this film.
It's successful in what it set out to do.
Agreed.
And it's charming for what it is, and so yeah, I like it, and I know what it means.
All right, I agree. I also know what he means fully. I unabashedly love this film. I'm just going to spill the beans now. This is probably my favorite Ernest film. Now, I love all of the first four Ernest films. you know, in different ways. But
and you haven't seen Ernest Goes to Africa yet, so like it could be.
Yeah, that's the one that could do it. But yeah, I partially because it is the first one I remember seeing, partially because, as I said, they are trying some things in this film that I think they stopped trying to do in later films. There is a little bit more of a balance. There is a little bit more of a thoughtfulness to this film that I actually really connect with and really appreciate. So, yeah, for all of those reasons, I definitely know what he means. And yeah, this, I mean, I might change my mind as we go through them, but from my memory, this is my favorite. And you know, as I mentioned, yes, there are some issues that it has. It's an Ernest film. There's going to be issues in all of them.
Yeah.
As you said, these were not out to try to make awards or get, you know, critics backing or anything like that. They were just meant to be entertaining. And even though I was talking about all of the issues that they have, honestly, a lot of those things, this is the first time I've noticed some of them.
Yeah.
So it does not mess with my enjoyment of the film. I still find the film eminently entertaining.
Yeah.
And would suggest it to anyone that has that would like this type of thing. It's great.
Yeah. By the way, one related bullet point, just talking about like and how it's enjoyable, is when the movie started and this continued through, it looked better than I expected it to. For like a $3 million film that was filmed in 1986, I expected it to just look a little bit cheaper.
When you compare this to Dr. Otto, you can tell. I mean, but that one was made for under $1 million. That one was made for only like a few 100,000. This had a budget of, like I said, 3.5, which is not a lot even in the 80s.
No.
But it also didn't need to be a lot.
No.
You know, I think that they used their money well. I think they had a bit more of a obviously they had a bit more of a budget. They had a bit more of a, because you know, I don't think this is a situation where the film was made and then they got the backing of Disney. I think that Disney would, because they're listed as producers of the film.
Yeah.
So,
for that much money, I would assume
Touchstone actually, right? Yeah, exactly. I assume that they already had people attached in order to get that budget.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there are some, you know, independent films that did well and then got distribution from different companies.
Yeah.
I don't feel like that was the case here. I think that they at least were tentatively signed on. No, again, I mean, they only got 3.5, but they didn't.
For what it's worth, the claim I saw about like the discussion of having Nurse St. Cloud be a romantic interest for Ernest.
Sure.
It claimed that part of that discussion back and forth involved Disney. I can't remember whether it was Disney was asking for there to be a romance or asking for there not to be, but like Disney was part of the discussion, which would mean it was there in the production stage.
You know what is now running through my mind as a potential reason for why they nixed it, which is, so, I mean, it makes sense for the time, but it's really gross. She's depicted as Native American. He is a white dude. You know, the interracialness, and it's going to be playing a lot in the South. You know, again, I think that that's gross and stupid if that was the reason. But there were, you know, even during this time, there were sillier decisions made in bigger things. So I wouldn't be surprised if that might have been something.
Maybe. Again, and like I said, I never got confirmation. I haven't seen any confirmation that it's true, but I would be inclined to read it more as they just felt like it was not in the spirit of Ernest, the jokey character.
Yeah.
But
I mean, he calls her if anything, we see it more from his side.
Yeah.
Because he still is kind of flirty with her.
Yeah.
So that's still in there.
Yeah.
It's just there's no reaction from her at all. Not even as, oh, you're a good friend, Ernest. Nothing. Not even her turning him down. Nothing.
Yeah. But like I was saying, regardless of where the money came from, like it seems like it was smart of them to put that money into cameras and film and
I think that they got
because on simply a production value, production level,
it looks
the film
pretty
looks
good.
and sounds good.
Yeah,
better than I would expect. Like better than the kind of stuff you sometimes see show up on like 80s VHS.
Well, I mean, the first scene, as you mentioned, is a night shoot.
Yeah,
and it looks 100 times better than the night shoot from Dr. Otto. So yeah.
Also, a bunch of this is outside, and that doesn't necessarily come cheap to begin with.
No, oh no, yeah, no, it's filmed mostly, I think, almost all on location.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
There
are only a few
there was the name of that park in Tennessee that they actually shot at. So
yeah.
Yeah,
so like we said, we enjoyed the film. We definitely suggest it. So I want to go ahead and give everyone it's the Patreon. Feel free to check out, more of our podcasts, if you're not already, discussions, Nostalgia Cow. And definitely do not forget to check out Movie Battles. We are in the middle of our tournament over there. Loren was playing in that. And I believe, did you call a match later on? I can't remember.
I think I did.
I think you did too. You did some stuff. You're around.
Been around.
You can see Loren at some point in Movie Battles, and if nothing else, you can look up some matches that he's in. But yes, definitely check out Movie Battles, the Flying Cow Movie Battles. It's on the Movie Battles YouTube channel. Feel free to check all of that stuff out. And of course, as you know, you can contact us at the Flying Cow Pod on Instagram and Twitter, and we are of course at the Flying Cow Pod. You can email us at theflyingcowpod@gmail.com and the Facebook group, all of that good stuff. And obviously we want to thank everyone for watching and listening, because if you're doing so, that means that you are a patron. So thank you very much for that. Loren, anything that you want to add before we close out the podcast?
No, you can find me on the standard socials. On, not that I post there much, Instagram at Loren UGA, TikTok if I get the song up. It is at Neural Snillick. It's my name backwards. And presuming it doesn't implode by the time this episode comes out, it's just Loren Collins at Twitter.
Right.
Yeah.
I've been looking into some other platforms possibly. We'll see. I've heard about Mastodon and Hey.cafe apparently.
Yeah, Matt heard about... not moved over to Mastodon yet, but I've heard a lot of discussion about it. So yeah.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, they're somewhat smaller communities, so maybe that'll help.
That's true.
Yeah. All right, but as we said, thank you guys for watching, and we will be back, of course, next month. But as always, moo. Know what I mean?
Moo.